Hi there, I'm the _twig and I like analysing game rules. Moon Druid is probably the most complicated subclass in D&D. Wild Shape has so many options, and as a player you really don't use the monster manual for anything else anymore. You need to put quite a bit of work into looking at all of the different beasts to work out which forms you should be picking. Luckily, I've done that work for you. I'm going to be looking at all of the best forms, as well as some specific tactics, potentially good multiclasses, good feats, and even some things like the best magic items that you could get. Actually, as a quick spoiler, the Moon Druid has a really interesting interaction with magic items, because from 3rd level they get a feature called Sign Up to the _twig's Patreon, which gives them a free rare. All of these guys got one, as well as early access to this video, an audio only version, and I actually posted the notes for this on my Discord a few weeks ago now. Jaleli actually told me about a really cool way that you can upgrade this to a very rare magic item called Bribing the DM, and SK, Mark Rainbow and Biney have confirmed that it actually does work. Right, let's start off by just looking at the basics of Wild Shape. As with all of my videos, I'm only going to be considering 2024 content, no backwards compatibility. As a bonus action, you can take the form of any beast below certain CR thresholds. For a Moon Druid, the only important thresholds are CR 1/4 at level 2, and then a third of your level after that. Also, no fly speed until level 8. Slight change from 2014, as a Moon Druid you used to be able to use either an action or a bonus action, but now it's a bonus action only. That means that some things like the Barbarian multiclass for Rage isn't as good anymore. You also now have to pick your forms at the start of each day, kinda like preparing your spells, but you have so many known forms that this is a pretty minor restriction. You also have enough wild shapes that I'm just going to assume you can use it every combat, especially once you hit level 5. Now, there's a bunch of things that you keep from your Druid form when you wild shape. Let's bring up the stat block for the giant wolf spider as an example. When you wild shape, you keep your Druid's mental stats, so we don't care about any of those. You keep your HP, but you also get 3 times your Druid level in temps, your AC becomes 13 plus Whiz, and you keep your save and skill proficiencies. That means that all we actually care about in stat block are the actions, traits, senses, and speeds. Nothing else matters. Actually, there are some monsters that have expertise and stealth, which is quite useful. There is one big loss though. Except for with skill checks and saves, you have to use your beast form's proficiency bonus. That obviously impacts your attacks, meaning that they are actually quite likely to miss at higher levels, but also means that it reduces the DC for your spells. If you're a 5th level Druid and cast Hold Person and then Wild Shape, it's actually much easier for your enemies to break out now. I don't often actively recommend homebrew, but in this case, just let your Druid use their own proficiency bonus. I've done the maths, it's not busted, and it just feels bad otherwise. You also can't cast spells while in Wild Shape, at least until level 18, except for the spells in your Circle of the Moon feature. Of these, Conjure Animals is actually quite good. Starry Wisp gives you an always accessible ranged option, which is nice, and Cure Wounds is just good to have. The other options probably aren't worth using whilst in beast form, you can do more by just attacking. Right, niche ruling things. There's technically nothing stopping you from choosing one of the swarms as a known form, but given that they actually aren't that great, I won't be mentioning them again in this video. I expect that most tables probably wouldn't allow them anyway. Also, quick mention to multi-attack. This specifies the exact attacks which you must make, but does not specify the order. So if you want to use a brown bear's claw attack first, you can. You cannot, however, swap out any of these attacks for an unarmed strike. So if you want to shove or grapple, sorry, no multi-attack. That's the only thing that you're doing on your turn. Finally, if you want to change your form or just refresh your temp HP, you can actually use Wild Shape whilst already in a Wild Shape. That is occasionally relevant, and some things later on actually rely on it, so look out for opportunities to make use of this. So, now that we know how the feature itself works, let's have a look at what you can turn into. We'll start off at level 2 with the giant venomous snake and the giant wolf spider. These are your best damage options, and they're actually better than anything else a druid can realistically do at this level, so I do recommend combat wild shaping, even if you're planning to be a land druid or something. The snake is slightly stronger than the spider, but it's really minor. They're basically the same, so realistically just pick whichever one you like more. Both have blind sight, so right from the start you can use Fog Cloud to get advantage for the entire fight, boosting their damage even more. The only appreciable differences are that the snake has a swim speed and slightly better AC, and the spider has spider climb and expertise in stealth. One of these will be your combat option, but you can know 3 other forms, so you have a lot of room for utility, and the best ones are the riding horse, which has 60 speed and can be ridden by another party member, a fairly normal CR0 tiny creature of your choice for infiltration purposes, typically people tend to like the regular spider the most, and very importantly, the giant badger. This brings us to our first special tactic of the video, Druidic. The giant badger is very unique because it has a 10-foot burrow speed. Raw, this does not leave a tunnel. What that means is that if you really need to put up your defences, you can wild shape into a giant badger and just dig down, giving yourself full cover. You can't be targeted by anything and no AoEs can reach you. This is especially good if you need to protect your concentration. Maybe you have an enemy pinned with permanent disadvantage from heat metal, and you don't want to risk it going down. Just dig down 5 feet and spend every turn popping back up using the bonus action, maybe throwing out a starry wisp and then digging back down to safety. You can do this even on a non-moon druid, it's really powerful. Now though, we'll level up to 3, getting access to CR1 monsters. Your best damage option here, by an absolute mile, is the lion. They have multi-attack, so you can make 2 attacks every turn, or 1 attack and an attempt to frighten someone with their roar. On top of that, they have pack tactics, for essentially permanent advantage if you cooperate a little with your party, or even just have one of your allies ride you. The lion is fairly vanilla though, so let's also look at some alternatives. The giant spider is our second best damage dealer, and also has their web attack for a ranged restraint, or the brown bear's claw attack can automatically prone a large or small enemy if it hits, which means that your allies will have advantage on their attacks as well. I'd pick at least one of these, maybe 2, since the lion can probably replace the riding horse as well. Finally, there's one utility option worth talking about in the giant toad. They have the best aquatic damage, but more importantly, they have their swallow ability, which can sort of remove one enemy from the fight entirely. There's no save, and no way to escape it without dropping you to 0 HP. It's a bit like a really crap version of Wall of Force if you squint a bit, but given that Wall of Force is a 5th level spell, hell yes I'd take a rubbish version of it at 3rd level. Now, in order for you to use Swallow, you'd need to be grappling an enemy. Right now the best way to do that is probably just use Bite on turn 1 and then Swallow on turn 2, assuming that they didn't break out. Later on though, we'll get some other forms which are much better at grappling, and you might even get some bonus action grapples, so it's definitely worth remembering that you can wild shape whilst already in a wild shape, in order to change form to the giant toad and swallow whatever unlucky fool allowed you to grab it. Right, we'll go to 6th level now, which gives us CR2 monsters, as well as this improved circle forms feature. Radiant damage is honestly just not very important. Resistance or immunity to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing is actually very rare. Adding your wisdom to your con saves is really good though. You now probably have between +4 and +6 on your con saves, depending on your whiz score and your forms. Speaking of your forms though, there's a new best damage option in the giant constrictor snake. This thing also has blindsight and can grapple people as part of its multi-attack. Remember that for swallow strats. If you don't like it though, your best alternative is the saber-toothed tiger, which weirdly doesn't have a bite attack. What it does have though is expertise in both perception and stealth, and the ability to disengage or hide as a bonus action. Pick one of these as your combat form. The only other thing worth mentioning here is the hunter shark, which is your best aquatic option. Now though, we get to the 3 most important levels in a druid's progression, levels 7, 8 and 9. Level 7 gives you Elemental Fury for +1d8 on 1 attack each turn. Cool, but the really important thing is access to 4th level spells. Conjure Woodland Beings and Conjure Minor Elementals are absolute game changers. They completely transform your abilities as a druid. Woodland Beings gives you an emanation with which you can run around and deal damage to everyone you move past, and Minor Elementals gives you a massive amount of damage on every single attack. Both are especially potent when upcast as well. Editing twig here, in case you weren't aware, there was recently an erratum which affected both of these spells. On Woodland Beings they basically just fixed a typo, but the change to Minor Elementals was more significant. When upcast, the damage used to increase by 2d8 per spell level above 4, but it now only increases by 1d8. This is a fairly major, and quite frankly necessary, nerf, but it is still a very good spell, and I still think it's a fantastic upcast target. For the purposes of this video though, the erratum simply solidifies my opinion that Woodland Beings is generally better. But Minor Elementals absolutely still has its place, especially against big single monster encounters. Hi there once again, this is Editing Twig Level 2. I've just redone a load of maths, and this erratum on Conjure Minor Elementals actually does a lot more than I thought it did. I will soon be making an assertion that the Giant Scorpion is pretty much the only beast that you actually care about after 9th level, assuming you're using Conjure Minor Elementals. This is no longer the case. There's a section following that where I sort of speedrun through a bunch of other beasts that you could take if you don't want to use the Conjure spells, and because of that erratum, those are now the best beasts to be using. Keep this in mind for later on because I will be contradicting what I say now. What I am saying now is correct. God damn it, Watsy, why did you have to change a core part of my video in the middle of production? Editing Twigs, out. From here on out, you're essentially going to be deciding which Conjure spell is the best in each fight, and then spending turn 1 casting that and wild shaping. And the two best forms of them right now are the Sabertooth again, and the Allosaurus. The Sabertooth is your choice for Conjure Minor Elementals. It has 2 attacks with a good modifier and high damage. The Polar Bear is actually just 0.5 DPR behind the Sabertooth, and its 20 strength means that it's slightly more likely to hit, so it's also a very valid option. But I think that the Sabertooth has better other features, unless you're expecting a lot of cold damage. The Allosaurus on the other hand is your Conjure Woodland Beings choice. 60 speed and a large size means that you can reach as many enemies as possible with your Emanation. The best action that you have here is actually to ready a move, so you can trigger Conjure Woodland Beings on all of your enemies a second time. You will take opportunity attacks though, since your bonus action disengage ends at the end of your turn. The Allosaurus does not hold supremacy for long though, because at level 8 you can choose beasts with fly speeds, and that means that the new star of the show is the CR0 Owl. This one is accessible to non-Moon Druids too. With 60 foot fly speed and flyby making you immune to opportunity attacks without even using your bonus action, you can reach even more enemies, and you don't take opportunity attacks if you ready a move anymore. Even better, because it's tiny, your allies can grapple the owl and drag you around without spending any additional movement, using a tactic called rugby. I covered this a lot in my video on unarmed strikes. The owl also has stealth expertise, making it great at infiltration. The Sabertooth also gets replaced quickly by the Giant Scorpion at level 9, which has 3 attacks per turn, meaning that you can get even more out of your Conjure Minor Elementals. It even has 60 foot of blind sight, and automatically grapples on a hit with its claw attacks, if you want to use swallow strats again. These 2 spells and forms are so much stronger than anything else you could be doing, except in some really niche cases like having Anti-Life Shell auto-win an encounter with no ranged enemies. As such, the rest of the forms are really only worth considering for utility, or if you specifically don't want to use the Conjure spells. Owl and Giant Scorpion are the best wild shape forms. Personally, I think that Owl with Conjure Woodland Beings is slightly better, since you can get the damage on turn 1 and your party can work together to multiply it. Whereas with Conjure Minor Elementals on the Giant Scorpion, you don't do any damage until turn 2, although it is definitely better against single enemy encounters. I do, however, want to backfill with a couple of other flying options, since I think that they are interesting, and we'll start with the Giant Bat. This thing also has 60 foot fly, and is actually large, so both gets a bigger emanation with Conjure Woodland Beings, and can carry your allies. Definitely worth picking up. The thing that makes it really special though, is that it also has 120 feet of blind sight, making it the best at a tactic that I like to call the Lancaster Bomber, because Lancasters are way cooler than B-17s. The idea here is that you fly way above the battlefield, ideally in the dark or over a tree line or around a sleet storm so enemies can't see you, but you can see them with blind sight, and then just shell down on them with advantage starry wisps, or core lightnings, or conjure animals. If you can get more than 120 feet of altitude, it's actually really hard for most enemies to hit you, even if they have range attacks, so this acts kind of similarly to the Druidic tactic from before. If you're going to be using Starry Wisps during the day though, Bloodhawk is an alternative for pack tactics and expertise and perception. If you're ever out of spell slots for your conjure spells, Lancaster tactics are probably my highest recommendation, and they are actually accessible to non-moons as well, except you can't shell with Starry Wisps. The level 12 CR4s worth talking about are the Elephant, which has the best non-conjure spell damage and is huge for when that matters, and the Archelon, which has 80-foot swim, so is the best Woodland Beings user when underwater. Then at 15 you have the CR5 Giant Shark and Giant Crocodile, which are the best non-conjure damage dealers in water and on land respectively, beaten only at level 18 by the CR6 Mammoth. The CR6 Giant Squid is also worth mentioning actually, because it has an automatic grapple on its 15-foot reach attacks, and its once per day reaction move ability lets it potentially trigger Woodland Beings on an enemy's turn whilst still attacking. And that is all of the forms that you really care about. If you want my recommendations for wild-shaped forms in one nice easy table, here you go. With all of our forms sorted, let's have a look at multiclassing. Before we go too far into this, there's a couple of rule specifics that I want to cover. First, a monster's multi-attack feature does count as taking the attack action for anything that you have which relies upon it. That means that if you're multiclassed a Beastmaster or something, you could give up one of your claw attacks or whatever to command your beast. However, if you somehow have the extra attack feature, you cannot use multi-attack twice, because multi-attack is already 2 attacks. You could however use the Allosaurus's claws attack twice, so it's not completely useless. As for your actual multiclasses though, I think that there are 3 really good options. Your first one, and almost certainly the best one, is the Monk. A single level gives you an unarmed strike as a bonus action. This can be a small damage boost, a shove prone to get advantage, or a grapple if your form is capable of one. It even scales with both strength and dexterity, so it doesn't matter which is higher on your beast of choice. And it can be used with a giant toad to grapple and then swallow in a single turn. If you then go to second level though, you also get unarmoured movement for plus 10 speed, and that's speed with a lowercase s, so it also applies to your swim, fly, burrow and climb speeds, and step of the wind for a bonus action dash, meaning that your Conjure Woodland Being's owl can actually fly 140 feet and then use its ready action to move another 70 feet. You also get 2 discipline points for Flurry of Blows on your Giant Scorpion's Conjure Minor Elementals as well. I don't think that going past level 2 is really worth it. None of the subclasses are very good, so all you really get is deflect attacks, which is admittedly a great reaction. Second up is the Barbarian. Rage isn't great except as a backup, since your spells are so good and it means that you can't concentrate. But Reckless Attack is lovely for boosting your damage, especially on a Giant Scorpion, and Danger Sense is very useful too. Again, I wouldn't go past 2 levels. Our final option though is a bit of a weird one. Warlock 1. Armour of Agathis has a really interesting interaction with Wild Shape, because it now only ends when you have no temp HP or after an hour. That means that you can cast it when you enter the dungeon, and then repeatedly use Wild Shape whenever your temps are low to refresh it. Remember that you can use Wild Shape while in Wild Shape to recharge your temps, and from 5th level you can convert 1st level slots into more Wild Shapes, so you really never run out. An almost permanent Armour of Agathis is fantastic. Also from Warlock 1 you can get Pact for the Chain, meaning that you don't have to spend a Wild Shape every day to get your familiar. And you can also get either the Imp or the Sphinx, which are just really incredible. Personally, I think that if you don't want to rely on the 2 conjure spells, Warlock 1 is the best multiclass for a Moon Druid. Something that you also want to ask when considering a multiclass though is when do you do it? Personally, levels 7 and 8 are way too important to me to delay, and level 9 is also really hard to give up. I could maybe see taking Monk at levels 9 and 10, but that's definitely only a maybe. And I probably wouldn't want to multiclass before I got my Giant Scorpion. If you aren't using the conjures though, I could see you taking an earlier Warlock dip. Maybe at level 6. The other niche case is taking a 1st level dip in Monk. This changes your saving throw proficiencies to Strength and Dexterity, meaning that Resilient Wisdom is a really strong feat, which also boosts your casting stat. On the subject of feats, let's talk about feats. First, I want to again remind you that the Beast form's attacks are not unarmed strikes. Tavern Brawler's reroll and Grappler's punch and grab do not work. Grappler is still an okay feat though, since many of your wild shape options, including the Giant Scorpion, do still grapple, so it gives you advantage. It's actually especially good if you take the Monk dip, since now you can grapple with your bonus action. I'd also like to bring particular attention to Spell Sniper, which is probably the first time that that's ever been said. Spell Sniper increases the range of your Starry Wisp to 120 feet. That means that when doing Lancaster tactics, you can fly up to 150 feet above the battlefield, which is out of the range of the vast majority of range attacks. Outside of those, it's mostly fairly obvious stuff. Warcaster is amazing, Resilient Constitution means that starting from 6th level you probably have +8 or better on your con saves, and Skill Expert can give your beasts an expertise as well. Couple of potential trap options. Speedy's 10-foot boost is to speed with a capital S, so it does not boost your out's fly speed, only walk speeds. And spells that you get from Fey Touch or whatever cannot be used whilst in Wild Shape. I will also quickly mention that of Crusher, Piercer and Slasher, most of the best forms do slashing damage until you reach the Giant Scorpion, which does bludgeoning and piercing. Next on the list is a fairly short section, Species. Essentially nothing works whilst on Wild Shape, so pick whatever you like for out of combat stuff. The only exceptions are the Dwarf's additional HP and Human's additional Origin feat do carry through, although I doubt that either of those are relevant enough for you to base a species decision on. And our last section is all about magic items. Whilst in Wild Shape, anything that can't be worn or carried melds into your body, meaning that it's not useful. There's no real guidance for what you can and can't use, but for the purposes of this video, I'll only be considering capes and necklaces, and also hats, because a warrior bear in a helmet is a fairly common fantasy trope. You also can't use any items which require you to cast a spell whilst in Wild Shape, but you can use out of combat magic items, or those which are only used at the start of combat. With one exception, I won't be talking about them though, because absolutely everyone can make good use of out of combat items. I will say that you probably have more freedom with your attunement slots than the rest of the party though, just because your other options are so few and far between, and that's why I believe that the single best uncommon item for a Moon Druid is the Weapon of Warning. Give the entire party advantage on initiative. Fantastic. Basically every party wants one of these, and by taking it for yourself you save the fighter an attunement slot, and let them use another better weapon. Other good options here are the Cloak of Protection and Stone of Good Luck, which are just really nice stat sticks, as well as the Saddle of the Cavalier if you're going to be letting your allies ride you. That's a pretty sneaky good option. Warning, the Wraps of Unarmed Power don't work. Your beast attacks are not unarmed strikes. They actually aren't even natural weapons anymore. That term no longer exists. So if you are using backwards compatible options, the Insignia of Claws technically doesn't work anymore either. Moving on to rare items, the Amulet of Health and Iron Stone of Protection are again really nice stat sticks, which just boost your survivability. Also available are the Cloak of Displacement and the Mantle of Spell Resistance, which boost your defences against attacks and saving throws respectively. Defensive items are actually really important because it's otherwise pretty hard to increase your defences in Wild Shape. Finally, there is the Wings of Flying, which is the only flying item that Wild Shapes can use. You can also potentially start getting belts of giant strength here, but I'm not considering them, since I think that the waistline of a saber-toothed tiger or a giant scorpion is probably significantly different from a human's. But you can always ask your DM, because they are fantastic if you can use them. Moving on to very rare, there's only one useful item, the Iron Stone of Strength, and it's only useful if you're using a strength-based form which doesn't already have 20 strength. Fortunately, that does include the giant scorpion. The Iron Stone of Agility is nowhere close to as good, because very few of the strong beast forms use dexterity. Finally, if you get to legendary items, the Iron Stone of Mastery is basically your only way to boost your proficiency bonus past +2, since basically none of the CR5 plus beasts are really worth it. Other good items are the Scarab of Protection, which is a direct upgrade to the Mantle of Spell Resistance, which also boosts AC, and the Cloak of Invisibility, which actually doesn't cast a spell to make you invisible, meaning that it can be used in Wild Shape. Overall, the magic item selection is very limited. There's basically nothing that boosts your offenses at all outside of a couple of Iron Stones, so personally, I'd be asking your DM to homebrew some stuff. Or actually, do it yourself and then give it to your DM to review. Don't make your DM do more work. And please think about the game when you're not actually playing. Players should do prep work too. And that there is pretty much everything that you need to know about Moon Druids. If you enjoyed going, quite frankly, way too deep on this, I have similar videos on dual wielding and unarmed strikes, so why not check them out? I'd also really appreciate it if you would share this with your friends. Maybe it would inspire a fun character in your next game. Bye!